Hi everyone, this is Josh from Narrate. This past weekend, Narrate had the privilege of hearing from guest speaker Brian Hopkins, a leader who has played a significant role at Narrate for years. Brian spoke on surviving and thriving during times of crisis.
Hi, Narrate. How you doing today? My name's Brian. Really good to get to be with you. So fun to get to be with you. It's been way too long since I've gotten to be back with you. 4 years or something was the last time I was here. And can I just say a word about Adam and Teresa, can I just tell you do you know how blessed you are to have those guys leading your church? Amazing pastors, not just in Adam and Teresa, but in your entire staff, all of your pastors, literally some of the best pastors anywhere on the planet. Absolutely amazing. So you should give them a raise, right? You should just give all of them, right? Give them a raise. Show of hands, did you have a fantastic Independence Day? Fantastic 4th of July? Yeah, you had a great 4th of July. We did. I'm from California. We were with some friends at some other friends' house, swimming and grilling and fireworks. And can I just say, fireworks are horrible in California. Like they're so boring. You can't shoot anything into the sky. Everything is this little fountain that shoots up like this high, the People's Republic of California. Nothing can be dangerous there. Who loves fireworks? Yeah, you pyromaniacs in the house. How about dog lovers? Like, raise your other hand if you're a dog. Yeah, you just have to be so careful not to mix dogs and fireworks because this happened. Like, this actually happened. So here's a guy. That's a Roman candle. Little kid's going to light the Roman candle, and it's going to be This is not California, by the way. So the Roman candle is going to do its thing, here it goes. And watch what is about. Look at the, yeah. Watch this guy, right? Look at this guy right here. He's like, ugh, get hit by the. Poor dog had no idea what was even going on. You're okay, buddy. It's going to be okay. We're going to talk today about surviving and thriving during times of crisis, because that right there was dang near a crisis. And because every single one of us here today finds ourselves in one of three places. You're either in the middle of a crisis right now. You don't have to raise your hand if that's you. Maybe you're just coming out of a crisis. You don't have to raise your hand. Or maybe you're fine right now, but there's a crisis coming that you don't even know is coming, and it's about to whack you upside the. And we need this message, don't we? Because our world is full of crisis, right? Our world is just full of crisis. Where I live in Sacramento, California, we had a crisis a couple of weeks ago. It was so intensely, you guys think it's hot here. It was so intensely hot a couple of weeks ago. It was over 112, 113 degrees, and we were melting, and we found out why. This is actually why it was so hot. Sacramento's closer to the sun than the rest of the planet. And the other night, you guys had a little crisis here, didn't you, right? A little earthquake, right? Like the biggest one in a long time. And everyone was posting about, exactly. You might not have heard. There was some serious damage there. But really, how do you survive and thrive during times of crisis? Are you ready to survive, but not just survive? Are you ready to thrive during times of crisis? The millennials, which are the generation who are ages 18 to 35, they take a lot of heat for being pretty selfish and apathetic, don't they? And yet what we know about millennials is that they care deeply about what have been termed these global crises. In 2016, the World Economic Forum surveyed more than 26,000 millennials from 181 countries, asking their opinion of what they thought the three most serious crises affecting the world are today. For the second time in a row, millennials are most concerned about, number one, you ready for this? Climate change. Number two, followed by large-scale war. Number three, you know what this one is? Religious conflicts. And some people would say, those are crises, aren't they? And yet, oftentimes, the very most difficult crises that we face are those that strike maybe a little closer to home. Because by and large, we can keep climate change and large-scale war and religious conflict. We can keep those generally at an arm's distance, can't we? That stuff happens to other people in other places like half a world away. But for some of us, stuff crisis hits closer to home. You lose your job. You get the call from the doctor, and the diagnosis is the big C, dreaded C word. It is cancer. The last ultrasound indicated that something isn't quite right with your baby, unborn child. The school called, and the financial aid package they promised you isn't quite what they told you originally. You don't know if you can even go to school now. The house you wanted to buy, the sale unraveled for whatever reason. The chaplain shows up on your doorstep, knocks on the door to break the news about your son, your daughter, your mom, your dad, and the car accident. We've all had a crisis moment, haven't we? And we will, rest assured, have more crisis moments. And do you know what to do? Do you know what to do? Do you know how to survive? And not just survive, do you know how to thrive in the midst of the crises that you face? That's why we're talking about this today. That's why this message matters. Because 4 years ago, personally, I was not ready for the president of the Democratic Republic of Congo to not allow our 4 adopted daughters to come home to our family like they were supposed to. 4 years ago, I wasn't ready for the 2.5-year saga that ensued. Long stretches of time, months, long periods of time, when we didn't have any idea where our 4 daughters were, who had our daughters, what their health was like. We did not know if our 4 daughters were even still alive. And I want to be more ready next time crisis comes calling in my life. I want you to be ready as well. And the people of the nation of Israel, they were no strangers to crisis. If you've got a Bible, turn to Exodus chapter 14. We'll also put the text on the screen for you. And I want to just set this scene up for you. Exodus picks up where the book of Genesis, the first book of the Bible, leaves off. There's a brand new Pharaoh in Egypt, and he notices that the Israelites, well, they're multiplying. They're quite prolific. And he's threatened by the burgeoning numbers of Israelites. So what's he do? He enslaves them. He captures them, all of them, the entire nation, God's chosen generation, God's chosen people. Afraid of an uprising, he orders that all Hebrew sons be cast into the Nile at birth. Almost unthinkable crisis, infanticide. But there was one son who escaped the decree. What was his name? Moses. That's exactly right. And 40 years later, God appeared to Moses in a burning bush, sends him to deliver the people of Israel from the hand of Pharaoh. And Moses, with the help of his brother, what was his brother's name? Aaron, that's exactly right. He confronts Pharaoh on God's behalf, saying 4 simple words, "Let my people go." That's exactly right. You guys are Bible geniuses. Way to go. Pharaoh, of course, refuses, so God sends 10 plagues upon the Egyptians. You talk about a crisis, 10 crises, actually. And when the last plague killed Pharaoh's son, he finally allowed the people of Israel to leave. Finally, freedom. They're out of there. They're celebrating. But not so fast. In Exodus chapter 14, the Israelites face their first crisis since being released. They face devastating circumstances. See, it took all of about 5 minutes, and the Israelites are smack dab in the middle of a mess. And that's the first ingredient, by the way, of any crisis that we face anytime. It's devastating circumstances, like boom, out of nowhere. Life's looking good, life's feeling good. You're living life, and as I like to say, tall cotton, right? And then out of nowhere, bam, devastating circle. And here's how it unfolded for the Israelites. Exodus chapter 14, starting in verse 1. Let me read this text. Then the Lord gave these instructions to Moses. Order the Israelites to turn back. They've just been set free from years and years of captivity. They're fleeing Egypt. Order the Israelites to turn back and camp by Pi-hahiroth between Migdol and the sea. Camp there along the shore across from Baal Zephon. And then Pharaoh will think the Israelites are confused. They're trapped in the wilderness. And once again, this is God talking, I will harden Pharaoh's heart. He will chase after you. I've planned this in order to display my glory through Pharaoh and his whole army. After this, the Egyptians will know that I am the Lord. So the Israelites camped there as they were told. When word reached the king of Egypt that the Israelites had fled, Pharaoh and his officials changed their minds. What do they say? What have we done letting all those Israelite slaves get away? Our free labor pool has all just left. Here we are. We're going to have to make our own bricks now. So Pharaoh harnessed his chariot. He has a major change of heart. He harnesses his chariot, calls up his troops, 600 of Egypt's best chariots, along with the rest of the chariots of Egypt, notice, each with its commander. And the Lord hardened the heart of Pharaoh. the king of Egypt. So he chased after the people of Israel. Circle this if you have a Bible, circle this on your notes or wherever you're circling stuff. Who had left with fists raised in defiance. Israel is like, we're out of here. Stick it to you, Pharaoh. They're out of there. And the Egyptians chased after them with all the forces in Pharaoh's army, all his horses, all his chariots, his charioteers, all the king's men. Everybody is chasing. And the Egyptians caught up with the people of Israel as they were camped beside the shore near Pi-hahiroth, across from Baal Zephon. This is quite a scene, isn't it? And it's Israel's worst nightmare coming true right here. They just get free from Egypt, all those years of slavery, all those years of captivity, and now they've got the entire Egyptian army catching up with them. And why are they catching up with them? They're either going to do one of two things. One of them is they're going to take them back into captivity. What's the other thing they might do to them? They might kill them, right? Neither option is super appealing, is it? Go back into captivity or get killed. Show of hands, who's been chased by something or someone? Anyone ever get chased? Has a sibling ever chased you? Yeah, we've all been chased. And it isn't fun to be chased. Being chased is not at all fun, is it? My sophomore year of high school, it was 1990. I was with my friend cruising 24th Street in Billings, Montana. Anyone? I'm a Billings kid, right? Grew up on the west end of Billings. It's what all the cool kids did in 1990. We were in my buddy's dad's late 1970s Chevy pickup, this beast, faded orange paint, in-dash 8-track tape player. Some of you will have to Google 8-track tape. You have no idea what I'm even talking about. And this pickup was complete with lap belt seat belts on. It didn't have it was from the 70s, and it didn't have this thing. It just had lap belt seat, and you'll see why this detail matters in just a little bit. So we're cruising 24th Street in Billings, and you go to Kmart at one end of 24th Street, and you turn around in the Kmart parking lot, and then you go up to Grand Avenue north on 24th Street, up to Grand Avenue, and you turn around in the gas station parking lot. Remember, we weren't driving a Prius, so we had to gas up every, 70s, we were getting 2 or 3 miles to a gallon. We had to gas up every time, and then you go back and you do it all again, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. It was so stupid, but all the kids did it. Well, somewhere along the way, my buddy was driving. He must have cut someone off. He did something to tick off a car, a very compact car that turned out to be full of really big dudes. And these guys got mad. They got so mad that they started chasing us up and down 24. And we were really good, law-abiding, well-behaved church kids. And so we were quite unskilled at eluding a car full of big dudes it was a little like the O.J. Simpson car chase scene, 28 miles an hour up 24th Street. And then we'd turn around and go the other way, right? You picture just, slow moving chase. And they wouldn't leave us alone. We couldn't shake them off our tail. And so my buddy, not knowing what else to do, he pulled into a very dark parking lot, a few blocks off 24th Street. There was not another car. There was not another human being. And he stops the truck, much to I said, just keep driving. We'll be fine if we just keep driving. He goes, no, I'm just going to talk our way out of this and we're going to be just fine. There was no talking. There was no talking whatsoever. 5 huge dudes, it was like a clown car, kept piling out of this very compact car. We'd never seen these guys before in our entire life. And they just start punching and kicking the side of the pickup truck, starting at the back, working their way up and we were no match for these guys. My friend wrestled at 98 pounds his sophomore year. I weighed 105 pounds soaking wet. Our only defense was to lock the doors, roll up the windows, and stay put. But it was like a slow motion scene as some of you have no idea what this, it had manual window crank. I'm manually trying to crank up my window when all of a sudden this giant arm sticks through the top of the window, grabs the door lock, lifts it up, opens the passenger door right next to where I was sitting. And the next thing I know is I was suddenly being lifted up by my shirt front by this enormous dude, drags me out of the truck and shoves me up against the side of the pickup truck. Detail here, I'm still lap belted into the pickup truck and I can't get this thing off of me. I'm trying to press the button and get it. I would have run if I could have gotten free, and I promise I could have outrun these lugs like I'm Forrest Gump fast, but I couldn't get the seatbelt unbuckled. And all of a sudden, the dude who brought me out of the pickup winds up and decks me as hard as he possibly could, right square in the nose. Blood splatters everywhere. I'm stunned. My eyes are closed. What just happened to me? And I turned. I'm like, okay. And then he just kind of chilled out. like it was cathartic for him to deck me in the face or something. So I turn around, I sit back down, and I'm going to see, like, how's my buddy doing? How's my friend? And there's my friend, sitting very safely in the driver's seat of the pickup truck, just looking at everything unfold. He did have the big dude on his side of the pickup truck. His arm was pinned in the window, and he just kept cranking, making it tighter, and that guy's yelling, ow, ow, let my arm go, let my arm go. I jumped. I said, David, would you just please get us out? He starts the pickup truck, and he starts to drive away with that guy's arm still stuck in. I said, let that guy go, let him go. He rolled the window down, and that guy, and we went home to bed. Oh my God, like being chased is no fun. Right? Being chased. Bad things happen when you get chased. And the story of the Israelites being chased by Egypt, it's kind of like my story. The little, unarmed, kind of weak, scrawny Israelites and the big old, strong, all-powerful Egyptians, their entire war machine in hot, hot pursuit. And the Egyptians caught up to the Israelites. And with any crisis circumstances that devastating looming, the Israelites, they exhibited some crisis responses that were not at all helpful. Like, not at all helpful. 4 destructive responses, actually. Another way to say it is how to wreck your life in 4 easy steps. Here they are, right here. See if you notice any of your crisis response. Number 1, you look only at your circumstances. In the midst of crisis, when crisis is looming, devastating circumstances strike, the only thing that you can see is the circumstances of everything that's happened. Look at verse 10. As Pharaoh approached, the people of Israel, what'd they do? They looked up and panicked when they saw the Egyptians overtaking them, and they cried out to the Lord. And honestly, like, people do this all the time. Maybe some of us do this. When crisis strikes for many people, life becomes all about the size and the scope and the scale of our circumstances. And we forget entirely about the size and the scope and the magnitude of our God, don't we? I used to help train retriever dogs for a professional dog trainer. Now, let's be really clear. I know nothing about training dogs. I was not the teacher. I was simply a grunt. I helped train the dogs. That was all. I helped. It was a great job. They didn't even have to pay me because I had a black lab named Big Jake who desperately needed training. My parents said, if you don't get this dog under control, it was my dog, and if you don't get this dog under control, he's going to go somewhere not so nice. And so I said, okay, I'll get some help. I don't want my dog to go to the pound. And so I threw birds for the dog trainer. He helped me train my Big Jake. It was a win-win. We had this one test that we used to help us if the dog was ready to go back to its owner. We'd invite the dog's master out to the range where we worked the dogs. We put the dog next to me across a giant field, its master way over there, half a mile across this giant field. And in between me and the dog and the master, we any PETA people in the room, people for the ethical treatment? Anyway, just a little, I'm from California, so I have to be really sensitive with this kind of stuff, right? And we'd put dead ducks and geese and pheasants scattered all over they were dead and they were frozen, so there was no pain involved here. And we'd scatter them all across this field. And understand, these dogs were bred to chase and retrieve birds, right? It was like hardwired into them. This is what they were made. Retrieve, 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 retrieve. And we'd set this whole scene up. And when it was time, we'd tell the master, call your dog. Call your dog. And if we did our job training that dog, he would completely ignore all those birds that we spread out across this field to try to distract him, and he would run right on a beeline straight to his master. But if the dog focused on even one of those birds, he was a goner. He'd run straight to the birds instead and panic and freak out and think he was supposed to retrieve all the birds and start running around trying to find all of them. Our job, though, was to teach the dog to focus his eyes only on the master. If the dog kept his eyes only on the master, he would not be tempted. And friends, it works the exact same way with us. When crisis strikes, when devastating circumstances strike, friends, keep your eyes on your master, capital M, master. Or whatever crisis you're facing will distract. Get your focus off your circumstances, off your problems, off all of the what-if scenarios. Instead, focus on your master, capital M, your God, and his goodness to you in the past, his closeness to you right here, right now in the present, his power to help you through this crisis into your future. Look only at your circumstances. Step one to ruining your life. Number two is blame shifting, refusing to take responsibility. Look what they said to Moses. Look what the Israelites said to Moses in verse 11. And they said to Moses, why did you bring us out here to die in the wilderness? Weren't there enough graves for us in Egypt? What have you done to us? Why did you make us leave Egypt? Instead of just owning this moment, instead of just saying, we're all in this together, we're sure happy not to be in captivity anymore, the Israelites, what do? They blame shift, they pass the buck, they refuse to take responsibility. And people do this all the time, don't they? Honestly, this is one of my biggest pet peeves as a parent. And any of you with me? Who's parents in this room? Parents in this room? Yeah. Does this bug any of you? Here's how it goes. I'm a dad of 13 kids. And here's how it goes. I walk into the kitchen, and in some circumstances, there are, I don't know, up to 13 kids in the kitchen, right? And there will be an open box of cereal and a gallon jug of milk sitting on the kitchen table, just sitting there. Milk getting all warm. And who cannot stand warm milk, right? You with me? Milk has to be ice cold, right? The milk's sitting there getting warm. The cereal box is wide open. It's getting all stale. And I say, see if this plays out in your life. I say, hey, who left that out? And I point to it. And guess what? Every single kid, 1 through 13, guess what they all say? What do they say? Not me. Not me. It's the most amazing thing. Like literally, no one left that out. Like no one did it. And sometimes our kids will start offering their professional investigative opinion about who exactly left it out. It's like a real life game of Clue. Preston in the kitchen with the milk and cereal, right? And if that kid whose name gets mentioned is in the room, they start vigorously defend as if they're arguing before the Supreme Court of the United States that it wasn't them, it is the Does that happen to you? Tell me I'm not it doesn't happen to you. Oh, okay, good. There's a few. Thank you. Honesty reigns in this room. And that just drives me crazy. And it drives you crazy. Why? Because we want our kids to own their stuff. We want our kids to step up, be men and women of integrity, take responsibility for good stuff, bad stuff, mistakes, stuff. Just own it. Just own it. No blame shifting. Just take responsibility. You all showed up for the early service today, so this is free, no charge for this little tidbit. Honestly, though, that stuff, who left the milk out, who left the cereal out, it's bothering me less and less and less these days. Now, sure, my kids will tell you I sometimes get upset when the cereal and milk get left out and no one owns up to it. But more and more, you know what I'm doing? I'm just putting it away myself. And quite enjoying the putting of it away myself. Because you know what? In like the blink of an eye, our kids, what? They're going to be gone, right? At least I'm planning on our kids being gone at some point in the future. And when they're gone, I won't have anyone left leaving messes like that out anymore. And in all candor, when that happens, I'm going to miss the kids dearly who used to make those messes and wish they were still around, not taking responsibility, playing the blame, right? Number 3 is really closely related to that one. Number 3, developing, third step to ruining your life, developing a negative perspective. Look what the Israelites say to Moses. Didn't we tell you this would happen while we were still in Egypt? Didn't we? We told you this was going to happen. We said, leave us alone. Let us be slaves to the Egyptians. What's that called? What's that called right there? It's called pessimism, isn't it? And I heard a guy say once that a pessimist is an optimist with experience. Right? That's what a pessimist is, an optimist with experience. But what the Israelites are doing, it's called self-pity. They've got a really big, severe case of the PLOMs. You know what the PLOMs are? The poor little old me's, right? They've got the pouty pooties, woe is me. You should have just left us there. And Eugene Peterson says it so very well. Self-pity, and this is what exactly is going on with the Israelites. We do this a ton, don't we? Self-pity is a crippling emotional disease that severely distorts our perception of reality. We can't even see reality clearly because we're so consumed by our circumstances and we're feeling so sorry for ourselves. We can't even get a glimpse of the landscape. We can't even get a glimpse of what's really going on. And the Israelites had a huge case of it. Number 4, when you're in that spot, you begin to make rash, unhealthy decisions. Anyone know what those are? Rash, unhealthy decisions. Listen to what they say. Listen to what they say to Moses. It's better to be a slave in Egypt than a corpse in the wilderness. That's their line. And I can guarantee you, however, that while the Israelites were stuck being slaves in Egypt, making mud bricks all day long, getting beaten by their slave master, they'd said just the opposite. They said, it'd be better to be a corpse in the wilderness than a slave in Egypt. And us, you and I, the Israelites, reacting poorly to circumstances with rash, unhealthy decisions is a surefire way to end up in a whole lot more mess than you ever started with. You just dig deeper and deeper and deeper. So here's the question for all of us. Could there be a better way to face crisis in our lives? Could there be a better way? The answer is absolutely. Number 3 on your outline, healthy responses. This is Moses' prescription, God's prescription via Moses for crisis management. I'm going to give it to you right here. But Moses told the people, listen to what he says. Don't be afraid. Just stand still and watch the Lord rescue you today. The Egyptians you see today will never be seen again. That's quite a promise. The Lord himself will fight for you. Just stay calm. Then the Lord said to Moses, this is hilarious to me. Then the Lord said to Moses, why are you crying out to me? This is the first time God ever interrupted a prayer meeting and told people to stop praying. It's right here. Why? They're actually crying out to God. They're praying to God. And God's like, oh, why are you crying out to me? And look what he says next. Tell the people to get moving. Pick up your staff. Raise your hand over the sea. Divide the water so the Israelites can walk through the middle of sea on dry. And you can just picture Moses standing there going like, dude, I wish I would have thought of that. I should have thought of that. All I have to do is put my stick out over this water. It's going to part. Why didn't I think of that? God had to tell me to do everything. And look what he says. And I will harden the hearts of the Egyptians. They will charge in after the Israelites. And my great glory will be displayed through Pharaoh and his troops, his chariots and his charioteers. That's code for they're all going to die, right? When my glory is displayed through them, all Egypt will see my glory and know that I am the... That was funnier, by the way, than you gave it laughter for. That, honestly, it was funnier than you gave it laughter for. They will see my glory and know that I am Lord. Now, this is an astounding scene. I don't know about you, but I want to be just like Moses in Christ. He's in the midst of this enormous crisis, and I want to be just like, he's got one of the world's most fearsome armies right on top of, and he's acting like, just another day. Oh, I just raised my stick over this water. No problem, no big deal. And God says to you and I, you want to be like Moses in the midst of life's most difficult crisis? Here's the prescription right here. Write these down. Number 1, keep your cool. Number 1, keep your cool. The way God says it is, don't be afraid. Right at the top of that text. Is that hard for some of you to keep your cool? Anyone? No? Nope. Okay, a few. Yeah, good. Thank you very much. Didn't leave me hanging up here all by myself. It's hard for me. It really is. I come from a very long line of overreactors. And my default, anyone with me in that? My default is to lose my cool. And when you peel the onion on the lose your cool deal, it comes down to feeling like you have to solve whatever crisis that you're facing all by yourself. Your cool gets lost, actually, because you're overwhelmed by circumstances. You take your eyes off God and you begin to freak out, which is why Moses' reminder to the nation of Israel is don't be afraid. It's his reminder to them. It's his reminder to us. Don't be afraid. You're not here in this circumstance. You're not here in this situation all by yourselves. And then there's kind of a little PS, like, if you were in this circumstance all by yourself, well, then you should probably freak out. Then you should probably lose your cool. But God says, you're not. You're not. You never are. You never are. Because you're God's. We're God's. He's our God. We're his kids. And he's got us. And he's led us here. And we're following him. And we're trusting him. And he's at work. And he was at work with the Israelites. And he's at work in us, all around us, every single. Keep your cool. Number 2. Just go in the best direction. Just go in the best direction. Even if, this is the parentheses here, even if it looks tougher, just go in the best direction. The way God said it to the Israelites was just stand still. Just stand still. You talk about something that's easy to say, hard to do, right? Amen to that. You get this scene. The Israelites, they're pinned up against the sea. They've got the sea to their back, the Egyptian army to their nose, and they're trapped. And I put myself in their Birkenstocks, and I can hardly even imagine. That was their official footwear, by the way, Birkenstock. And I would be freaking out. And you can be sure that's exactly what they're doing too. They're freaking out, mass panic. And Moses just cuts right through the panic and the freak out, and he says, just stand still. And you can be sure their response was something like, what do you mean, just stand still? We got to get out of here. We got to make a way. We're all going to die. We're going to drown in the sea. We're going to get killed by the army. We got to figure. And here's how it often goes. The way out and the way through that God was making for them is not the way we might have expected it to go. It was going to be right through the middle of the sea. And the Israelites wouldn't have guessed that in a million years. Why? Because it looked like the very worst, most dangerous option. The worst way, and God says, go in the best direction. It's my direction. The way that can only happen if I do something amazing and spectacular in such a way that when you take a step, God has to show up, or it's like lights out, show over. And here's what we also have to keep in mind. Remember this whole scene. This was not a crisis to God. Your crisis that you're in the midst of right now is not a crisis to God. God's real clear with the Israelites here. He just says it in black and in white. I set this whole scene up. I arranged this entire scenario because this is God talking, I want people to see me, he says. He set it up. He allowed it to happen. He unfolded it. Number 3, expect God to work. Just expect God to work. Look at what Moses says. Watch the Lord rescue you today. Just expect God to work. And so many days, even me a whole bunch of days, I enter into a crisis moment and I just have this pessimistic expectation that God isn't going to work. It's like we expect in many instances God to disappoint us. And sometimes that comes from really valid places. We prayed a prayer for a long time that something would happen, and the opposite of what we prayed for happened, and we feel like God let us down, and maybe we feel like God's let us down again and again and again. And what Moses is doing here, what God's doing through Moses, is he's calling on Israel to hearken back to all the times the Lord has shown up. All the times the Lord has been faithful, over and over and over again. And he's not done being faithful. He's not done doing amazing things again and again. Just watch him, Moses says. Just watch. He's worked miracles before. He's on the verge of another one right here with the Israelites. He might just be on the verge of another one in your life, in my life, in your crisis, in my crisis, in the crisis over there. Just watch and see, he says. And then finally, Moses says to the Israelites, number 4, just go forward. Just go forward. You just get moving. And how many people just get stuck when they're in a crisis? How many people just freeze when crisis hits? And God via Moses just says real clearly, this is for us too, don't spend your life paralyzed by crisis. Don't spend your life being paralyzed by crisis. Go, move, do, act, engage, serve, reach out. Whatever it is, do it. Moses' prescription for surviving, there they are. And better yet, thriving in the midst of a crisis. It's all right there. God's prescription for thriving in the midst of a crisis. And I want to finish. Can I finish with one more thing? You good? Can I finish with one more thing? There's this challenge. Jesus says really clearly, to whom much is given, what's he say? Much is required. To whom much is given, much is required. And if you're wondering who in the world Jesus was talking to, you know who it is? Just look in the mirror. Right? He was talking to us. He was talking to you, and he was talking to me, and he was talking to us. And there's this moment that God invites every single one of us who call ourselves followers of Jesus Christ into with him. And it's to love and help and serve and give to others who are in the midst of a crisis. Right? Because it's not just supposed to be all about us and how do we deal with crisis. It's actually the invitation of God himself for us to be what we want people to be for us, for others who are being swept away by crisis. To be the hands and feet of Jesus to them. And no show of hands, but how many of you have someone in your life right now who's going through a just brutal, unimaginable crisis. And Jesus invites you, and he invites me, like, get off the bench, get into the game, help them, serve them. I just invite you to close your eyes and bow your heads if you would. And maybe you just take a moment with the Lord right now. And I don't know where you might find yourself today. Maybe you're just coming out of a crisis. Maybe you're smack dab in the middle of one. Maybe everything's going pretty good, but there's probably one looming. And maybe you and the Lord, you just cement some things. Where you go, okay, Lord, I see how my natural inclinations, my natural tendencies could be a lot like the Israelites. Maybe you just drive a stake in the ground with the Lord today and you say, but Lord, I want to go your way. Maybe right now, in the way that I'm going to face this moment, or the way I'm going to face the moment that I know is going to come at some point, when the phone rings or the doorbell rings or that relationship unravels, whatever it is. You just drive a stake in the ground and say, okay, Lord, I'm going to do it your way. Because it's just better. It just works. And then maybe some of you, you've got somebody in your world who's in the midst of the biggest crisis. It's almost unimaginable to you. And maybe you've been a little on the sidelines, not knowing what to do, not knowing how to respond, not knowing how to serve them. Maybe the Lord's just nudging you today to just take a step, get off the bench, extend a hand, make a call, write a check, bring a meal, make a casserole, I don't know. But where you have this moment where you're the hands and feet of Jesus himself. And the impact that you can have on a life, it's unimaginable. Just do one kind deed. And so, Lord, we say today that we're sorry for the multiple times in our lives when we've faced crisis poorly. And we confess we're desperately in need of you to help us face the next one your way. And so, would you strengthen us, please? Would you, by the power of your Holy Spirit, give us your courage and your boldness and your responses so that we can face that stuff your way. And then, Jesus, would you just send us out of here? Would you scatter us out of here today to be your hands and feet again and again and again and again and again in the big crisis, in the little crisis of our community, of our friends and neighbors and coworkers and classmates and roommates, and make us your hands and feet more and more and more, Jesus. We love you. You are the best. It's in your name we pray all of this. And everyone agreed together and said, amen.
If you would like to engage further with Narrate Church, you can find contact information online, www.narratechurch.org. We would love to hear from you.